This is the story of Richard Valentine Schneider. Richard Valentine Schneider was a proud man who started his life in Beatty, Kansas on February 14, 1939. His mother was Vida E. Hatton, who lived from 1896 to 1995. His father was Joseph C. Schneider, who lived from 1892 to 1971. His family was a family of musicians and merchants. His mother played the violin and sang, while the father played the trumpet. Richard himself played the guitar. He had 7 total siblings, although one was stillborn. Their names were Helen, Wilma, Rex, Maurice, Mary, and Patrick. Helen was born February 10, 1918, and died August 2, 1994. Helen married Anthony F. Voldenkamp. Wilma was born on December 30, 1919, and died on March 27, 2015. She married Kenneth W. Mason. Rex was born on May 26, 1922, and died on August 28, 1974. He married Rita M. McDonald. Maurice was born on November 13, 1923, and died on February 9, 1987. Maurice was also a U.S. Navy World War II veteran. According to documentation, he was not married. Mary was born on August 18, 1925, and died on March 16, 2006. She married Ray M. Goodrich. Patrick was born on March 9, 1928, and died on October 9, 2012. He married Rose Putzer. Out of all the children, Richard was the youngest, and as part of the norm all the time, he started smoking along with his siblings, except for Wilma, at the age of 11. Moving on to the duration of Richard's schooling lasted up until the 8th grade. 8th grade was the highest level available to him, so the only graduation picture he has is when he is 16 years old instead of 18. So afterwards, he decided at the age of 16 to join the Navy. Richard's decision to join was due to the fact that he did not want to be a farmhand. He wanted something more. Before entering the military, Richard found the love of his life. He found her when he was on a double date. It was his girlfriend's best friend, Janine Jean Jurgens. Even though he was with someone else, and she was as well, he fell in love with her that day. He still had to leave to join the military, to be able to start a better life for himself. He joined on February 29, 1956. It was only while in the military that Richard was able to get a high school education. They taught him beyond the basics of a 6th grader of our time now. The military benefited him in many ways besides just education. He had the opportunity to be able to see what is across the ocean and discover what other countries were like. During this, he successfully completed training in the General Trig course for POs, YN3, Boatswain Mate 3, Cargo Hand, GTC for PO, QM3, All 1. He also earned the Good Conduct Medal. He never received any wounds as a result of action with enemy forces. His enlistment in the regular Navy was terminated and transferred to the U.S. Naval Reserve and concurrent inactive duty on January 14, 1960. His official U.S. Naval Reserve designation was the USNRR, Ready Reserve. Richard was in the 9th Naval District. When he was 18, the Navy gave him his 3-day pass. He took this pass from the Navy to visit his parents on May 7, 1957. His mother, proud of him as any mother would be, brought him to the Eddington studio to take his picture, which we have documented and treasured today. On September 5, 1958, Janine took a bus from Opedo, Kansas to Providence, Rhode Island, where Richard was supposed to dock after his time out on sea. There, they were to wed. Janine was finally 18 and no longer needed her parents' permission to marry. Richard and Janine got married in a small chapel with Mr. Joe Paglareni and Miss Leah Paglareni. Richard and Janine, 2 best friends. Richard was 20 when he married Janine. After the ceremony, the reception had bologna sandwiches, potato chips, mustard, and Pepsi Cola. On Richard's return to the Navy, Richard returned to the Navy, finished his term of 6 years on February 28, 1962. Once reunited with Janine, he laid out a map and told Janine, "Close your eyes. Now take your finger and point to the spot on the map. Wherever you choose is where we will go." She pointed and landed on Omaha, Nebraska. While on their journey to the town, the two were caught driving a little too fast in their Ford Galaxie 500, and so Janine had to drive the rest of the way. Richard told her, "Just steer. Go down dirt roads. I'm going to get on the floor and handle the brake and gas. Do you trust me?" After arriving in Okido, Richard started working at many part-time jobs. It wasn't until he gained experience in Beatrice, Nebraska, that he started working as a butcher. Finally, he settled down after him and Janine bought the OK Market, otherwise known as the Okido Market. There he opened up the business that he owned until 1976. He sold his stock to hospitals, restaurants, the county departments, and many other facilities near and far from the market. During his first 2 years after buying the market in Okido, Kansas, him and his new wife, Janine, had a daughter who they named Dennise Rae Schneider, my mother. She is the oldest out of the 3 children they ended up having. The next daughter to be born is Leah Renee Schneider on August 14, 1963. After she was born, Michelle Diane Schneider was born on February 13, 1968, who was the youngest out of the 3. Working his way up, Richard soon became the mayor of their little town. As a father, he was protective of their daughters, but none more than Dennise. When Dennise was 7 years old, he found out one night that when she was walking to school, she had been attacked by 5 of their neighbors' dogs. Dennise had needed emergency care and was rushed to the hospital. Protective as he was, he went to the man's yard and shot every one of the dogs. His statement was, "If those dogs taste blood now, they'll taste it again. They're rabid." The doctor there told him they had given his daughter a series of shots to protect her from any disease they might have, because 3 of the dogs did turn out to be rabid. Later in the years, when Dennise was 15 years old, Richard packed up the market and moved to Bangor, Maine to start a new life. He lived long and happy there, even though it was another struggle living in a new state, where he knew no one. Richard soon found a job as a meat cutter at Elmer's C&M Market, while Janine worked as a law secretary for Alan Graves in Machias, Maine. After 10 years, Richard quit working at Elmer's Market and began working on the Cherryfield Foods as a foreman. In his free time, Richard could not sit still. He ended up purchasing a lobster boat and fished for hours. After 5 years of working at Cherryfield Foods, he quit once again and began working on the Merchant Marines. Richard and Janine lived good, long, and happy lives together. As they watched their children grow up, the celebrations during the holidays, their children having kids of their own, and celebrations with the new, wiggly little family members. Dennise had 4 children, 3 boys, 1 girl. Their names are Alexander Daniel Ray Polk, born June 24th, 1989, Richard Christopher Whitmore, born on July 31st, 1979, James Warren Polk, born on December 19th, 1984, and Mareke Johannah Whitmore, born on February 18th, 1998. Leah had 2 children, Mark Brian Perry and Carol Jr. While Michelle did not have any children, she was married for some time. It wasn't until after many years of smoking for his entire life that he started to suffer from the effects of the tar buildup in his lungs. He ended up in the hospital one night when he had sudden shortness of breath. Richard was terrified that he was having a heart attack. Being transported to the hospital in Machias, Maine by ambulance, only to find out that they could not deal with the situation. The hospital was not trained in the specifics of what was wrong with him. They transported Richard to Bangor, Maine, once again by ambulance, where they found out that he had had a heart attack. While waiting in the hospital, he was infected with a disease that worsened his condition and made it harder for him to breathe. His lungs started to compensate for lack of oxygen, and the doctors called his relatives to let them know the news and to say their goodbyes now. He died in the hospital on June 24, 2001. One memorable quote from Patricia Smith from Lawrence, Kansas says, "God saw he was getting tired, and a cure was not to be. So he put his arms around him and whispered, 'Come with me.' With tearful eyes we watched him suffer, and saw him fade away. Although we could not bear to lose him, we could not bid him stay. A golden heart stopped beating, hard-working hands laid to rest. God broke our hearts to prove he only takes the best."